Knitted by Whitney YouTube channel. This is the special 5K celebration video, which I had you all vote on, and you voted for a stash tour. Now, this is not my first time trying to record this stash tour. A couple of weeks ago, I tried to record a complete stash tour with all of my yarn in one video. I learned very quickly I was disorganized. I was ill-prepared. I was not ready to do the stash tour at that time, and it was a disaster. I recorded for 3 hours. I got through half of my yarn stash, and I bored myself with what I was talking about. So, as much as it pained me, I scrapped the footage. I knew it wasn't going to work for me, and I went back to the drawing board and I thought, okay, I need to get organized. Not only do I need to be organized about how I want to do these videos, yes, I said videos, but also my yarn needs to be organized before I can show it off too. And as you can imagine, showing it off in that first recording, it was a mess. And it took me a long time to put it away and have it organized, ready to bring out again when I was ready to re-record. And today I am ready to re-record. So let me start off first by saying this is going to be a series of videos. I have it planned out that this will be a 5-video series, and I'm hopeful that I will be able to record them all in batches and then release them in a 5-week set. So I don't know yet when that will be, but I will, of course, let you all know on YouTube and probably over on Instagram as well that will be coming. And it will be 5 weeks of videos. And I'm really excited about how I have organized these yarn stash videos. I have organized my yarn into 5 different categories, and I'm not quite sure yet what order I will go in, other than I know which one I'm doing first because that's the video that I'm recording today. So the first one is going to be local to me yarns. These will be primarily Nova Scotia yarns, but I do also have a couple New Brunswick yarns as well. The other categories will be hand-dyed yarn, lights and brights, hand-dyed yarn, Moody Jewels, store-bought yarn or big box yarn companies, and yarn that I have frogged from previous projects plus mini skeins. And I've put the yarn into those separate categories because it made relatively even-sized amounts of yarn to talk about. The first one, which I'm doing today, which is local to me yarn, is the smallest category. So that's the one that I've chosen to do first because it'll give me a good feel for how these videos are going to go, and it will also give me time to talk about how the series is going to go before I dive into going through the yarns. I also want to set a few ground rules about what I'm going to cover in these videos and what I won't be covering. First of all, any yarn that is currently in a whip is not going to be included. To me, that yarn is no longer in the stash, so it doesn't count. And second, I won't be talking about any leftovers from previous projects unless I have a plan for them. Otherwise, I'm just showing you my scraps. So now let me talk about what I will be including in these videos. First off, I'm going to include as much information about the yarn as I have. And for the most part, I'm well versed in what's in my stash, what kind of fiber materials I have, etc. But in some cases, I just don't know. So I'll give you as much information as I have. Second, if I have a project in mind for the yarn, I'll include a photo of the pattern right here and talk a little bit about the project. In some cases, I will be using yarn that fits the category that I'm talking about, but will also be including yarns that are from a different category that go with that yarn because I'm using them together in a project. In those cases, the main yarn will be part of the group that I'm talking about for the video, and the secondary yarns that would fit in another category will only be covered in the category of that main yarn. I won't be repeating in the other videos. And third, if I have any fun stories about how the yarn came into my stash, I will be sharing those. So now that I've given you a bit of the ground rules about how these videos are going to go, let's take a look at the first section of my stash, local to me yarns. Now these yarns are in no particular order. I'm just grabbing them from the bags that I have next to me and it'll just be a really fun exploration of the local to me yarns in my stash. Starting with this absolute beauty. This yarn is Ravenswood Fiberco. It is their 75-25 merino nylon blend, and it has a little bit of stellina in it because it is a sparkly yarn. And this one is a fingering weight, and the color is called Make a Wish. And it is a beautiful yarn. So we're not starting off strong. I don't have a project in mind for this yarn. This one was gifted to me by my best friend. There was one year where she was living in Toronto and we sent each other presents by mail. And she knew that this dyer was located in Nova Scotia, and she bought from this dyer's Etsy shop and had it shipped to me. And it was such a treat to receive. So to me, this is a really special skein, and I've kind of been waiting for the right project to make with it. And until then, I'm happy to just look at it in my stash because it is so beautiful and it's a present from my best friend, and that's really special to me. You've probably seen this next yarn in my stash spotlight section of my podcast. It is the same yarn that I just showed, only in a different color. This is again Ravenswood Fiberco merino nylon blend, fingering weight, but this time the color is squid, which I think you can tell why it is called that. This one I already have wound up and I have hair all over it because I wanted to swatch with this because I was feeling very inspired by it a couple of months ago. As you can tell, I still haven't swatched with it and I haven't knitted up. But I have an idea of what I want to make with this yarn. I don't have a specific pattern in mind, but I would love to make a little neck scarf with this. I remember when I talked about it in the stash spotlight of my podcast episode, I was really hopeful that I'd be able to find some sort of bralette or other type of garment that I could make with such a small amount of yarn, but I really can't with my size. I would definitely need more yardage than what I have. I only have the single ball. But I know I could definitely make one of those really cute little scarves that I shared in my top 20 scarves that are not the Sophie scarf pattern video. And I have a lot of other ones in mind, so I think by the time this video has come out, I will have already released my second video of 20 more scarves that are not the Sophie scarf. So you will now have 40 different scarves that you could make that are all cute little neckties or a variation of that that are not the Sophie scarf. And I have no idea which one I'm going to make quite yet, but this is on my radar for what to make with this beautiful yarn. I may have set myself up for success with how I organize my yarn because I think I have all of the yarns from different yarn companies or yarn dyers all together because the next few are all Ravenswood Fiberco. So maybe I did set myself up for success with this. But the next one is a really special one to me. Again, Ravenswood Fiberco. This one I think is, oh, here it is. It is their sock yarn, but it is an older base. This one is 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, and it is 400 yards. This one I bought, I think, in either 2016 or 2017. It's one of the oldest yarns that I have in my stash, and I picked this up from a trunk show that Samantha of Ravenswood Fiber Co. did back then. I think it was like just for like the local yarn guild, knitting guild. I'm not quite sure. I kind of crashed the party. Myself and a friend knew someone who was in this knitting guild, and she kind of invited us to come, even though we weren't really part of the guild. And I met Samantha of Ravenswood Fiber Co. there, and this was the very first time that I bought her yarn. It is also the very first hand-dyed yarn that I ever purchased. And, oh, sorry, the color is LMAO, which is one of her really, really old colorways. So she doesn't make this color anymore. Most of the colors that I have from her are specialty colors that I bought, so I don't even know if you could still get them. But all of her yarn is beautiful, and I highly recommend it if you are into some really fun colors. So this one I do have plans for, and it involves yarns that are not part of this category. With this yarn, I want to make the Audra shawl by Amba O'Brien, and this uses 3 separate yarns. So it uses 2 fingering weight yarns plus a lace weight. I am going to be using LMAO for one of those colors, striping with this gorgeous Hedgehog Fibers Kid Silk lace in the color Deep End. And I got this one in Florida. My parents are snowbirds in Florida, and I bought it one time I was visiting them from a store. I think it was Sarasota Yarns. I think it was in Sarasota at least. But these will be for the 2 main colors of the shawl. So the 2 main colors are a fingering weight and a mohair striped. And then you have an accent color. And for my accent color, I have chosen Knit Picks Capretta in a really fun highlighter yellow. And this is actually one of my absolute favorite colors in the world. And I just think these 3 yarns together just create this really fun and funky palette. I'm really into it. So the Ravenswood fiberco yarn sat in my stash for a really long time, and I wasn't really sure what to do with it. But you know, sometimes when you are organizing your stash and you just sort of like pull everything out and it all becomes a mess on the floor. That happened one time, and all 3 of these yarns ended up close to each other, and it just really sparked an idea in my head, and I wanted to use all 3 together, and then I found the Audra shawl. One of my favorite things about following Ravenswood Fiberco is that every Friday she sends out a newsletter, and in that newsletter she shows off some of the colors that she's been working on. And that has led to the purchases of these next 2 yarns that I'm going to show you one at a time. And the first one is this, which is Standing Out in a Crowd, which is on her worsted weight base, which is just superwash merino. And this is it still in skein form, but I do have one that I have caked up because I want to swatch with it, because I know exactly what I want to make with this yarn. I would love to make the Easy Eyelet Yoke Sweater by Chantal Miyagashima of Knititude. I have made the Easy Eyelet Yoke dress, and the sweater has been on my list for quite a while. And I remember from making the dress that it is a pattern that goes incredibly quickly. It's a circular yoke where the rows of increases are done using yarn overs, so you get these gorgeous rows of eyelets. And I loved how fast those increases went when I made the dress. It shocked me how fast they went. I have either just enough or slightly less than I need for the Easy Eyelet Yoke pattern. So this one might be a little bit of an experiment. However, I really want to use up every scrap of this yarn. So if I need to, I'll crop the sweater, but I have a feeling I'll be able to get exactly the size that I want out of these gorgeous, gorgeous colors. And my last Ravenswood fiber colors are these. These ones are Evening Glow on the Grass. And, you know, I don't really get a whole lot of a grass vibe from these, but I do get a gorgeous autumnal vibe. I really love the color variation in this yarn. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. It's definitely moody, dark academia, that kind of color scheme. Also, I do apologize for all the pet hair on my yarn so far. That's going to be a case with a lot of the yarns that I share, so I hope that doesn't bother you, and if it does, I apologize. But these, I thought when I bought them, I was going to make a lane splitter skirt, which I have made before. It's a pattern that I really, really love because it's very customizable for length and fit. However, I don't have quite enough of these, so I think what I would like to do instead is a feldspar tee by my friend Hannah of Herb Garden Knitwear. She's definitely one of my favorite designers, and I really think these would look lovely in that pattern because it's basically a stockinette, a boxy stockinette tee with a few ridges of purl rows for detail, and I think that would allow these colors to really shine. The next yarn I want to show off is Nerds with Needles. This is their Best of the Worsted, which is 100% superwash yarn. This is the color Dragon Scales, and I remember them telling me that it is specifically yellow dragon scales or golden dragon scales. I can't remember which one exactly. But I picked this one up at our local Comic-Con event, which is called HalCon. And at the time, I bought it because I was going to be making a baby clothing item for some friends of ours who are big D&D fans. But I ended up going in a different direction, and I came up with my own colorwork sweater to knit for their baby. So I ended up not using this yarn at all, and I was going to sell it or give it away or something, but Doyle saw it in my pile of yarns to destash, and he loved it. So he laid claim to this yarn, and I'm going to make a hat with it for him. That's what he really wants out of this yarn. This next yarn is pretty special to me. It is Handmaiden Angel Hair, and this yarn is special to me because I picked it up on the day before my wedding. So I got married in October 2023, and I ordered my flowers from a florist who is located in the Annapolis Valley, which is a little far from where I live, but I really wanted to get flowers from them because a couple of my friends had gotten flowers from them, and their vibe was very much wildflowers, which is very much the vibe that I wanted. So to me, it was worth it to take a drive out and get the flowers from them. So my maid of honor and I made a day out of it, and we stopped and went to one of the local yarn stores in the valley, one of my favorite ones. It's called Gasborough Valley Fibers. It is in a barn, and they have a field with sheep. They have an alpaca. I think they have pigs as well, definitely chickens. So they've got this cute little farm there, and they also sell yarn out of their farm. And I really loved this yarn as soon as I saw it. Handmaiden is definitely more of a luxury brand around here. They have a sister company called Fleece Artist, which does slightly more affordable yarns, but they are all very high quality yarns. They're beautiful, beautiful colors. And this one really stood out to me as soon as I walked into Gasborough Valley Fibers. And this color is called Mink. And it's kind of like a dusty, purpley, brownish taupe. It's kind of hard to describe the color, but I loved it as soon as I saw it, and I really felt that it suited me, and I have exactly the pattern in mind for this. So I bought this before the pattern was released, so I don't know if I have more than I need or exactly what I need for the pattern. I have a feeling that I have more than I need, but that's okay. The pattern is the Tied and True cardigan by Starcross Knits, and this is a pattern that I have been lusting after ever since Tamara showed it on her Instagram when she was asking people if they would be interested in the pattern. I followed her progress of making it for I think 2 years before it was finally out. It has since come out. It's available. It's been available for a couple of months, but I definitely want to make it out of this yarn. I want to make 2 versions of it. I want to make a long sleeve and a short sleeve. This is the yarn that I will use for the long sleeve. Speaking of Gasborough Valley Fibers, the next yarn that I have to share is by them. It's their alpaca! I bought this yarn several years ago. It is a chunky, chunky boy. I think this is 550 yards. I honestly don't remember. I don't have the tags anymore, but it is huge, and it is the most gorgeous chocolate brown imaginable. And I have already caked up one skein. As you can see, it is big. Like, these are this is almost as big as my head. This is also almost as big as my head. They are chunky. But this is a DK weight alpaca. And originally I had used this to try and make a Gigi Cardi, but I stopped pretty early in the pattern. So that's why I'm including it in the local Nova Scotia yarns, not in yarns that I have frogged, because I barely started that Gigi Cardi. I have other plans to make this now. I plan to make the Wildflower Paths sweater by Melody Hoffman, who's one of my favorite designers. I really think that this gorgeous brown alpaca will look beautiful with those textured stitches along the yoke of that sweater. But this is not quite thick enough, so I am going to be holding a non-Nova Scotia yarn with it. I have some Drops brushed alpaca silk, which is a dead ringer for matching the alpaca yarn. I was stunned when I put these together and realized how close of a color match they are. So I'm really excited to use these together because the alpaca is already crazy, crazy soft, but the brushed alpaca is going to add a bit more thickness and loftiness because this is technically, I think Drops categorizes it as an Aran weight. I think it's more of a DK, but it'll give me the plumpiness that I need to meet the gauge of the Wildflower Paths sweater, which is a worsted weight pattern. So I'm very excited to make that pattern. I don't think I planned it this way, but my first section of local to me yarns that I shared with you were all the really soft versions of yarn that I have. This next batch is more into the toothy, woolly, rusticy local yarns to me, but that does not make them any less beautiful or any less beloved by me. Let's start with a really fun one. This is my Taproot Fibers, 1 sheep, 1 fleece, 1 wool. And this is a special yarn that is all spun from 1 sheep's fleece. And this one is from Ginger. And this is 710 yards of bulky weight yarn. And this one is gorgeous. So you can tell this one is quite rustic with all of these little pieces of fluff coming off. This one is also more of like a roving single ply yarn. It is only single ply. It's not plied more than once. So it's not a yarn that I typically gravitate towards. I think I have one that's already caked up that I used for a swatch. I know the swatch will work, which is good. So I don't typically buy single ply yarns. They're not my favorite. But I figured with this one, the toothiness and the rustic qualities of the yarn would probably prevent it from pilling, which is what typically happens when I use really soft, like superwash merino roving yarns. I find that they pill really, really quickly. This one I don't think will because it is so rustic, or it'll probably pill really, really badly and then I'll just be shaving it off all the time. Not quite sure because I haven't knitted up yet. But I am very excited to be using this to make myself a knitted skirt. I'm going to be making the Bryn Mawr skirt, and I'm very excited about how this yarn will knit up as that skirt. I have just the right amount of yardage for it, so that was another reason why I chose the skirt rather than a sweater. I knew I could get a better garment to fit me using this small amount of yarn. 700 yards is a fairly small amount of yarn, even when using bulky weight, especially for me as a plus size person. So I knew I could get more mileage out of it by doing a skirt rather than a sweater because I wouldn't have to worry about knitting sleeves. And I loved the idea of being able to make a really thick and cozy winter skirt. I am someone who still loves to wear skirts and dresses even in the wintertime. I have some really lovely merino wool tights that keep me nice and warm. So I thought, why not make a wool skirt to wear over those on those really, really cold days? And I just love the colors of this yarn. I just think there's so much beauty to them. And I love the idea that this is from 1 sheep. It was their whole fleece sheared off of them and then spun into this one collection of yarn that I was able to purchase. It's one of the more expensive yarns that I've bought to get all of these together, but I really loved the idea of the specialness and the sustainability of it being from a single sheep. And I really love this particular company, Taproot Fibers, which is located about an hour away from me, because they have a lot of really good ecological practices. They're very much all about keeping their carbon footprint low. They try and do stuff as local as possible, involve the local economy, that type of thing. And I think their yarn's really, really special. There's nothing else around here that does something similar to that, the 1 sheep, 1 fleece idea. But there are some really great wool producers here in Nova Scotia. I have one more yarn from Taproot Fibers, and it's a little different from the One Sheep, One Fleece. This one is a mix. So this one is still one sheep. So this is Louise, but she is a mixed breed. Ginger, I think, has a specific breed, but it wasn't written on the packaging. This one is also bulky weight, but it is a thinner bulky weight than the Ginger. So this is how thin Louise is. But this one, you can tell, has a little bit of thick and thin going on, which doesn't upset me. It's not my favorite kind of yarn. I'm not a big fan of it, but I'm also not significantly bothered by it. But this one I bought to make a hat. And considering that this is a mixed breed sheep, there is something really, really soft in that mix. I don't know what sheep it is, but this is like almost next to skin soft for a rusticy, woolly sheep. So the other thing about Taproot Fibers is, for the most part, they sell the natural sheep colors. They do have dyed skeins as well, but I find the true beautiful skeins that they sell are the ones that are the natural sheep colors. And I'm so excited to make this one into a hat. I'm going to make it into Jason's cashmere hat, which is my favorite hat pattern out there. It's also my kind of reset pattern that I do whenever I'm kind of stuck with what I'm working on, or if I don't know what to work on next, I'll cast on a Jason's cashmere hat. That's my favorite pattern. And I'm going to do a really big faux fur pom-pom with this. I think that'll be really, really fun. But again, that's Taproot Fibers. My other favorite Nova Scotia yarn producer is Lismore Sheep Farm, which is a totally underrated yarn company. They have a farm that is about an hour and a half away from me, and they sell these beautiful skeins of yarn for $8 Canadian. And they ship, as far as I know, worldwide. Maybe they only ship to Canada, but they have beautiful, beautiful yarn for an incredible price. And every time I go up there, I buy something. This is my most recent purchase from them. And I remember going there when I first became a knitter, when I was still using stuff from Michaels, the really soft acrylics, and, you know, maybe a superwash merino. Maybe I just dipped my toe into that, but I was using the really nice fancy stuff. And then I went to Lismore Sheep Farm for the first time. Which is a beautiful place to visit if you're ever in Nova Scotia and you want to get a farm experience or a sheep experience. They have their sheep nearby, so you can see the sheep, sometimes pet the sheep, especially in the spring when the lambs are born. The lambs are kept in the barn in small enclosures, so you can get to pet them and feed them. It's such a fun experience. I have done a video of my last time visiting them. I didn't get there this year. I got there last year, and I had so much fun, and it was so wonderful to see the lambs. We got to see the adult sheep being shorn. It was really, really fun, and that's when I picked up this yarn. So this is their pure wool, which is, well, it's 2-ply, 215 yards per 4 ounces, 113 grams. The gauge on this one, it says it is 18 stitches per 4 inches on 4.5 millimeter needles. So for me, that's probably a DK, maybe a thick DK, light worsted, around that range. But I have two colors. I have green heather and I have natural light gray. So the natural light gray is, as its name says, a natural sheep color. So this one, that's what the sheep looks like. But the green heather has to be one of my favorite yarn colors that I have ever seen. And I'm sorry that there is other little bits on it, but this yarn is just so gorgeous. I love how many colors are in that heathered green. Like, you can see oranges, yellows, reds, blacks. There's so much color in this skein. And I have 5 of the green heather and 1 of the light natural light gray. whichever order the name is. And I am going to be making the Through Shadows pullover by Melody Hoffman. And this is her Lord of the Rings inspired sweater. I purchased these yarns, I think like a couple of weeks before the pattern came out. Maybe it was a couple months before the pattern came out. And I knew I had to get these colors because tell me that is not a Hobbit green. It is the perfect Hobbit green. And then I felt that the gray really popped against the green, but also the gray kind of reminds me of Starlight. So it's not as bright as the vial of star water that Galadriel gives to Frodo, but it does look really beautiful against the green. It does really pop. So I wanted to use these two together because there is an element of color work to that sweater. And I love that this will be my Lord of the Rings sweater made with this super beautiful Hobbit green yarn. Now my last yarn in this collection is not Nova Scotia, it is New Brunswick yarn. But that does not make it any less local to me. New Brunswick is very close to Nova Scotia, and I did purchase this from a Nova Scotia yarn store, Tracy's Rolling Yarn Shop. Now, this is one that I featured relatively recently in a podcast, Stash Spotlight, but I'm going to be showing it off again. This is my Lichen and Lace yarn. And this one I have purchased Citron, which is the green, and Pumpkin, the orange. So in that podcast, I talked about as soon as walking into Tracy's shop, I was immediately drawn to the Citron yarn. I was drawn to the Lichen and Lace yarn in general, but the Citron is what stood out to me the most. And then I noticed the pumpkin as well, and I was going to get a sweater's quantity of the pumpkin, but then I remembered I already have a sweater in this color, my Dartmoor sweater. So I switched tactics and I grabbed a sweater's quantity of the Citron, but there wasn't quite enough for me. And then I held the pumpkin next to the Citron and I thought, wow, I love those colors together. Because I originally thought I would do a sweater of the Citron and a hat with the pumpkin, but I loved them together. So I decided that I'm going to use them together to make the Milkweed DK sweater. And I'm going to be holding this with mohair just to help me meet gauge because this is a sport weight fiber. This is their Rustic Heather Sport, 100% Canadian wool, 215 yards per 56 grams. And you can buy this one on the Lichen and Lace website. It is available for purchase. Both colors are still on the website as of the last time that I checked. But the Milkweed sweater is a DK weight sweater, so I do want a little bit of mohair to help me reach gauge for that pattern. And I have decided to hold, I have one ball of Knitting for Olive in autumn to go with the pumpkin. And I know what mohair I will hold with the Citron. I just haven't purchased it yet. It will be Knit Picks Aloft in the color Tarragon. So it's a beautiful yellowy green. It looks very nicely with the Citron, just comparing the photo to the color on the website. But this will help me sort of buff up the sport to get to that DK weight gauge. And I'm so excited about this color palette. I really, really love it. It's not something I'm going to get to very soon, but this is going to be a really fun sweater when I do knit it up. So those are all my local to me yarns. This wraps up my first video of my yarn stash tour in celebration of my 5,000 subscribers here on YouTube, which again, I am so, so grateful to each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making this a really lovely corner of the internet. And I'm really happy that you have joined me here. So if all goes well, these stash tour videos will be releasing in a period of 5 weeks. And if you want to be one of the first people to find out when the next video comes up, hit the subscribe button down below and then ring the bell icon. That way you'll be notified as soon as the next video goes live. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining me. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate it. While you're here, it would help my channel if you would like this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave me a comment below. Let me know which of these yarns was your favorite. Make sure you are subscribed because there are more stash tour videos to come. I hope you all take care and happy knitting!